Hello, children. It's time for a little Halloween story. Called The Phantom of the Black Isle. It would take a brave man or a fool to be out on a night like this, growled old Joshua, as the rain lashed the windows of the lighthouse lamp room. His apprentice, Tom, looked out across the sea, where mountainous waves rose and crashed with deafening roars. Above them, bleak slate clouds swarmed across the sky like ragged demons. Tom had been learning the trade of lighthouse keeper for almost a year now, but this was by far the worst storm he'd witnessed on Black Isle. For a split second, the dazzling glare of the lamp went out, before immediately sparking back into life. "Darned electrics," grumbled Joshua. "Never had trouble with oil. You knew where you were with oil." Tom smiled. Joshua had worked on Black Isle since the 1860s. The new century had brought many changes, and the old man sometimes struggled to accept them. "Well, if you're right, no one will need our lamp tonight, Joshua." "No God-fearing sailors, maybe," said Joshua with a grunt. "Only the likes of Jacob Gizzard and his cronies come to grief on a night like this." "Who's Jacob Gizzard?" asked Tom. "Oh, a stone-hearted villain who terrorised this coast 100 years ago," Joshua replied. Tom's eyes lit up. "A pirate?" "That's too fanciful a name," spat Joshua. "Murderer, I calls him. He plundered ships up and down this coast and killed those got in his way." "Did they ever catch him?" Tom asked. Joshua gave a slight smile. "The sea caught up with him in the end. They say it were on a night like this he went about his dark business." A storm whipped up and dashed his cutter, the Sea Vixen, to pieces on these very rocks. This was afore the lighthouse was built, you see. The next morning they found the wreckage washed up, but not a jackman of her crew. These waters handed out justice to Gizzard and kept him for their own. Tom shivered at the thought. "That's enough yarning for one night," said Joshua. "You get along to your bunk. I'll wake you when it's your watch." Despite the increased safety brought by the new electric lamp, Joshua insisted that he or Tom kept an eye on the machinery throughout the night. "It only takes one spark, lad," was his doom-laden warning. Tom descended the winding stone steps to the tiny curved room that served as their sleeping quarters. Despite the howling gale outside, Tom soon sank into a deep sleep. His head was filled with thoughts of Gizzard and his last fateful trip. Tom imagined the Sea Vixen smashing into the razor-sharp rocks below. He pictured the pirate struggling to stay afloat until all that was left was a bony, frozen hand poking above the waves. Somehow, it seemed to be reaching out toward him. "Look lively, lad!" Tom woke with a start to find Joshua standing over him with a mug of steaming tea. "What's the matter with you, boy?" he asked. "You're white as a sheet. Storm's still raging." "It'll be a long night." The next morning, the storm had fled with the dawn. The skies were clear, and Tom felt a bracing breeze on his cheeks as he explored the rock pools that fringed the island. Something glinting in the water caught his eye. Scrambling forward, he found a small golden coin wedged between two rocks. Tom used a sharp pebble to pry the coin free and examined it. The head of King George III told him the coin must be around 100 years old. A fanciful thought struck him. Could this be part of Jacob Gizzard's treasure? Had it been brought ashore, when the sea vixen broke up all those years ago. Delighted with his find, Tom returned to the lighthouse. For a moment he thought of showing the coin to Joshua, but he was worried that the old man might make him hand it over to the police or the revenue men who patrolled the local waters. Under Tom's bunk was a small box he'd brought with him when he came to the island. It was here that he kept his collection of shells and other bits and pieces he'd found washed up on the beach. Tom dragged out the box and took the coin from his pocket. Was it his imagination, or did it seem to glint just as brightly inside the dark room as it had done in the sunlight? It shone with a light unlike any other Tom had ever seen. It was almost as if the coin itself were glowing. Carefully, Tom wrapped the golden guinea in his handkerchief and placed it inside the chest. That night, Tom took his turn on watch as usual in the lamp room. In contrast to the previous night, the sea was calm and quiet, almost eerily so. Surely no one would need the Black Isle's guiding light tonight. Tom let himself doze off for a few minutes. He was awoken by a low, moaning sound. At first, he thought it must be Joshua grumbling about this and that as usual. But Tom was all alone. The moaning began to get louder. Nearer. Had the sea not been so calm, Tom might have thought it was the wind. It was a mournful, pained sound, like a soul in torment. As if from nowhere, a ship appeared on the horizon. Normally, a vessel that far off would have been almost invisible at this time of night. But this was no ordinary ship. It was bathed from bow to stern in an ethereal golden glow, as if... Is it on fire? Tom gasped. The ship sped ever closer, and as the moaning grew louder still, he realised there was something unnatural at work. Joshua! He cried out in panic. Joshua, come here quickly! Tom reached to pick up a telescope from a shelf behind him. He turned back, lifted the telescope to his eye, and nothing. The ship had vanished as quickly as it had mysteriously appeared. Joshua had staggered up the staircase. What's all the other, boy? He panted. How could Tom explain what he'd seen and heard now that the sea was empty and the only sound was the breaking of the waves below? Joshua would think him crazy. Nothing, mumbled Tom, red-faced. I thought I saw, something, but I must have been mistaken. Joshua snorted and went back downstairs, muttering under his breath. Tom stood staring out to sea. Even if he'd imagined the glowing ship, how had that unearthly moaning not woken Joshua? He kept a sharp lookout all night, but there was no sign of any vessels, let alone the mysterious glowing ship. All next day, Tom could think of nothing but the previous night. That evening, as he took over from Joshua in the lamp room, his stomach churned with anticipation of what might lie ahead. The sea was rougher tonight. The waves rose to massive peaks, the sea continually swirling and pounding. But as the night wore on, nothing out of the ordinary occurred. So much so that by midnight, Tom had once more allowed his eyes to droop, and sleep found him. With a sharp crack, the light behind Tom went out and the lamp room was plunged into total darkness. And then, just as before, a melancholy wailing filled the air, growing more insistent with each minute. The golden glow appeared far out to sea and began steadily making its way closer. The raging seas made the supernatural ship even more frightening than before, as it rose and fell, all the while racing toward the lighthouse. Keeping his eyes fixed on the ship, Tom reached down for his telescope. In a single movement, he whipped the instrument out to his eye. It took a few seconds for him to adjust to the violent glare of this closer view. The ship was a cutter. On its deck, Tom could make out a man dressed in the bicorn hat and knee breeches of 100 years ago. But his clothes were not the strangest thing about him. The man's skin was a sallow, almost transparent yellow, which glowed in the night, just like the vessel on which he stood. As the ship carved its way ever nearer, Tom could make out every detail of the mariner's fearful face. His mouth was wide open, stretched beyond what seemed natural. The source of the terrible moaning became obvious. Tom stood transfixed by the man's horrible sunken eyes, which seemed to be boring into his very soul. Then, to Tom's greater horror, the man raised his arm and pointed a skeletal finger straight at him. It was a bitterly cold night, but beads of sweat dotted on Tom's forehead. The ghastly figure twisted his hand and laid it open, palm up. As if waiting for something to be placed there. In that instant, fragments of what Tom had seen and heard in the past few days began to piece themselves together. As if to confirm his thoughts, the nameplate of the ship became visible through the spray. The Sea Vixen. Instinctively, Tom realised what he had to do. He fumbled his way to the top of the staircase in the dark and edged his way down to the shared sleeping quarters. Joshua lay asleep on his bunk. If the sorrowful moaning had miraculously left him undisturbed, Tom saw no point in trying to wake him. In any case, it was up to Tom to finish what he had unwittingly started. He dragged the chest from under his bunk, tore open the lid, and scrabbled around inside, clutching the tightly folded handkerchief. Tom raced back up the stairs to the lamp room. The ship now seemed impossibly close to the lighthouse. Its golden glow almost matched the strength of the still extinguished lamp. Shielding his eyes from the glare, Tom unwrapped the golden guinea from the handkerchief and went outside, onto the ledge of the lamp room. Not daring to meet the terrifying gaze of the man he was sure was Jacob Gizzard, Tom hurled the coin toward the ship. The golden light flared up like an explosion, and the next moment it was gone, along with the Sea Vixen and its sinister captain. Tom slumped down in a heap and let out a long sigh of relief. With a blaze of light, the sky was illuminated once more. For a split second, Tom's heart leapt at the frightful thought of the ship's return. But this light was a pure white beam that stretched out across the sea. The Black Isle lighthouse was back to normal. Tom decided not to speak of the events of that night to Joshua. The old man would never believe him, and after all, there was no evidence to back up Tom's extraordinary experience. Or was there? A week later, along with their usual provisions, the local newspaper arrived by fishing boat from the mainland. "Listen to this, lad," said Joshua as he skimmed through the paper after their supper that evening. "Divine rescue. Joshua cleared his throat. On the night of Thursday last, the steam cruiser the Mary Ann narrowly avoided disaster on her way back from Le Troquet. The vessel found herself caught in a most dreadful storm and ended up many miles off course. For reasons unknown, the lighthouse on Black Isle was inoperative, and the Mary Ann would surely have been dashed to pieces on the notorious rocks, had it not been for the presence of a ship which emitted such a bright light. The captain of the steamship took it to be a warning. Tom smiled. It seemed that Jacob Gizzard had committed a good act at last, whether he intended to or not. Perhaps now the pirate might sleep soundly in the waters around the Black Isle. The end. Now, I hope you weren't too scared. And if you weren't too scared, boo! Happy Halloween.